Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Roger. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Alistair Stevens, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Lindian Resources Limited. And also, I would like to, before I read his biography, I would like to acknowledge the Nigerian Minister for Solid Minerals, His Excellency Dr. Dele Alik. I understand he is also in our presence here. So now getting back to Mr. Alistair, who is the CEO for Lindian Resources. He is going to be presenting the KANGANKUNDE project, aka the King. Is that what it means, KANGANKUNDE?
No, it doesn't mean that. I just didn't know that.
Oh, okay. Yes, so Mr. Stevens joined the mining industry as a mine geologist at KCGM in 1990 and has since acquired working experience in mining, processing and logistics operations, corporate governance and finance. For the last 20 years, he has been CEO and managing director for several companies in the critical minerals and rare metal sector in project development and feasibility engineering. His 10 years experience in Malawi has provided a critical insight into his current role as CEO of Lindian Resources Limited and the development of the great KANGANKUNDE rare earth project. And I think it's appropriate for me to say Mulibwanji. Ladies and gentlemen.
To the traditional owners in the country in which we live, with all protocols observed for all dignitaries and special guests today, with a special mention to Honourable Monica Changanamuno from Malawi. It's a delight to have you here today, and it's great to actually be on stage to actually present what a wonderful project this is that you have in your country. And to Queen Nakundu, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Alistair Stevens. I had a bit of a joke about the disclaimer last year and about how I would test the boundaries of my legal objectives, and I'm still going to push the boundaries in terms of what I can be bold and audacious in this conference. Just to tap on the corporate structure, important numbers in that we have $24 million in the bank and another $20 million almost in options that are all in the money that could precipitate between now and the end of December 2025. We have a great corporate structure. We've got good turnover, good liquidity, and we have the top 20 holders who have 65% of the company. So it's a very good, well-structured organisation for liquidity. We've extended the board from last year. There's been some talent acquisition come on board. We've also got a management team, and I'll tap into where these gentlemen have been influential in this project development. So just to step back a bit, at this conference last year, we didn't have ownership of the project. We were going through shareholder approval for the acquisition, which was approved, I think, on the 29th of September. And we started with a zero base of information other than historic data that existed back in the 1980s. So that's an image of KANGANKUNDE, and we started drilling there in mid-October. And people said we couldn't drill through the wet season. So we said, no, we don't believe that. And we lost 2 days. So we've had a particularly successful drill program. What I'll present to you now is something that is not 12 months old in terms of the history of the organisation. It gives you an indication of the quality of the project, but the intent of the organisation. KANGANKUNDE is located in Malawi, which is in the southern and eastern African country. The project itself is south of a town called Balaka, which has about 30,000 people. It's 25 kilometres by the M1. It's close to 2 power lines, a 66 kVA and 132 kVA line, which are out to the west by about 6 and 7 kilometres. It's only 5 kilometres from the M1, so it's a particularly short upgrade. No need for accommodation or flight or aerodromes on site. It's also very close to infrastructure of railways, so that those grey and white dashed lines are the rail system. One goes out to the east to Port Nacala and one goes south to Port Beira. So it's ideally located around infrastructure. This is the outcome of less than 10 months of work. We drilled about 15,000 metres of drilling, and we're proud to say that just recently we've announced a resource from nothing to 261 million tonnes at 2.19%, containing 5.7 million tonnes of rare earths. Within that, there's 1.2 million tonnes of NdPr. We've also done our test work programs. We're getting recoveries of 70% and concentrate grades of 66%, which are superior in the rare earth industry. And I'll tap into that a little bit further because they're really important on the context of what I'll tap on in a moment about net zero. What is the net zero capability of this project? You can't miss this project. The image on the right is a photograph taken from the highway about 10 kilometres away. It stands up as a very proud hill around a surrounding plain, and that entire complex is mineralised, as we've found out, which I'll explain to in the next slide. So this is Jeff's work, Jeff Chapman, who's been head of mining and resource development for the project. The drill holes that are all, in yellow traces is not because he had a brain fixation one day and lost orientation. It's on the top of the hill, there's no soil, it's hard, and it's very hard to get drill rigs into spaces. So we had to plan drill holes where it was available on the site, on the top of the hill. What we have is a central carbonatite complex, which is this lavender zone, surrounded by a breccia around the outside. There's two other holes that are important. So these yellow holes are the resource development holes. The two holes here that I want to point out in the next slide is this deep hole, which went 980 metres, and this hole, which is finished down at 1,000 metres. The important part of these deep holes was that it extended the mineralisation out to the east. So this stitched zone here is additional mineralisation that we didn't expect, which leads us to a conclusion there's potentially a larger halo of low-grade mineralisation around this complex. So if I go back, the average grade's about 2.19. That low-grade mineralisation we're talking about is somewhere between 1% and 2%. That's what we call low-grade for this project. And on the right is the estimation domains that we had within our resource modelling. So we've got a resource model, we've got the potential to extend that mineralisation as an annulus around our current drilling program. So this is what it looks like in cross-section. These top drill holes, this is the mineral resource in section, and these top drill holes, it's about the same scale, so it goes down to about this level. So this surface mineralisation or surface drilling indicates the surface mineralisation we have. So that's where our 261 million tonnes comes from. This is probably the most spectacular drill hole that, well, it's actually going to be the second most spectacular drill hole in the rare earths industry because we've got a second one coming. And that interval is 854 metres at 2.73% mineralisation. That was designed to actually test what an exploration target dimension looked like underneath the mineral resource. So it's very easy to see. It's not going to be rocket science to see that mineral resource could be duplicated 2 or 3 times at depth. The blue trace here is the drill hole to the north. The darker trace there is where it intersections this current plane. That drill hole will be released in the next couple of weeks. So it's very easy to see that this has enormous geometry and dimension and capability to be not just a 261 million tonne resource. It could be 500, it could be 750 in one day. It may even be 1 billion tonnes. So it is unbelievably fantastic in terms of its geometry and the importance for the industry I'll explain soon. Not only do we have potential for that mineralisation around this particular complex, which is just this one, we've got a project to the south we call the Southern Knoll, a project to the north called the Northern Knoll, and from the geophysical data that we purchased from the Malawi government, there's actually magnetic targets to the north. So there's plenty of scope to actually even expand upon the current resource into a regional area within the mining licence and the exploration licence that we have. We've done our metallurgical test work, and this is where it gets really interesting, not just the fact that we've got this massive deposit. 70% recovery at a concentrate grade of 66%, which is outstanding for the industry, and a 20% ratio of NdPr, which is very healthy. 2 important issues here. This is by gravity separation, water-only gravity separation, no chemicals, a chemical-free process. And we've now had the test work out of ANSTO that quantifies that this is not radioactive. We said it was all along it wasn't radioactive. Now ANSTO have tested it. It's not class 7, it's a general goods material. And that's a really good footprint for, first, your ESG and your carbon footprint, your whole environmental management, but it means your commerciality of selling concentrate is now global. We're not restricted by border controls around radiation management. So they are stunning results for this stage of the project. We haven't had it 12 months yet. So that was Mark Steffens, who's been doing all our metallurgical test work. And this is Rico Britz, he's based in Johannesburg, as well as Trevor Hewer, who operates a company called Infracon in Malawi. They're putting together both the civil infrastructure and the engineering design programs. So now we've got 3 work modules at the moment. On the left-hand side there's a mill. We've just about completed the civil engineering for the mills. We've completed the civil engineering for the central part of that complex there, which is what called multi-gravity separators. So that's the recovery process with the wet, high-intensity magnetic separators at the back to clean up the concentrate, with a thickener at the back end. And there's a picture of the Honourable Minister on site being shown where the infrastructure will be constructed. And this is the timeline of activities. So we've completed our first stage of mineral resource exploration, which is an inferred resource. So we're currently doing an infill program at the moment to upgrade part of it to an indicated resource. That will come together with our mine design, metallurgical plant design, and tender construction programs by the end of this year, with the deliverables of various reports that will constitute what will be a feasibility study produced in the first quarter of next year. We also expect to commence our civil works for roads and plant design within the first quarter of next year, with plant construction going in second quarter and third quarter of next year, with commissioning in last quarter of next year. This is designed to be a simple first stage plant on the basis that we want to enter this market at a small scale. I can't tell you what the production numbers or what the scope around that is at a point in time, because there's restrictions on what I can say from a compliance perspective until we've actually got the indicated resources and completed the feasibility study. But it'll be something like the top 10 producer of a mineral concentrate rare earth in the world for the first stage, with it running for 2 or 3 years to enter the market, to get a reputation for the quality of concentrate, to understand what customers want, and then to build a strategic development program by expanding this project further into the future. So this is a low-cost, very simple processing plant that will have operation or commissioning in the last quarter of 24. Just touch on a little bit about the rare earths before I go on to further context of the project. Most of the rare earths, the most important commodity in the rare earth is the NdPr. That's what goes into magnets. So the rest of the rare earths go into batteries and catalysts and metallurgical applications or phosphors. The magnet one is interesting in that NdPr is the primary component to the permanent magnet. And there have many applications. Then there's that little light green box at the top, which is the terbium dysprosium component. So you have either an NdPr magnet or you have an NdPr magnet doped with TBDY. And you do that because that enhances the magnet's performance in a temperature environment. So where you're using it with wind turbines or cars, you add TBDY. Where you're using it with computers and electronics and whatever, it's just a standard NdPr magnet. The important thing here is you have to unlock the supply chain of NdPr to be able to unlock a market for the TBDY. So they're connected both together. So you take a project like Meteoric's ionic clay in Brazil, it needs us to produce the NdPr so that it can actually have the market for the TBDY. And then in value, the magnets have small in terms of volume in the market, but they've got primary representation in value of rare earths. And as an example of the amount of rare earths that we'll need within the industry, this is just new offshore installation of wind turbines in the world between mostly Asia and China and Europe, and the growth between now and 2032 requires an extra 39,000 tonnes of NdPr. This project will probably only produce 10% of that in its first stage, but we're setting it up such that the second stages of expansion, which have an optimised facility, can have substantial scale to fund that market. So when you put this project together, It's a water-based gravity separation technique. So water preservation is going to be important for us, and we're looking at that very carefully. We're within KUINEA, 5-6 kilometres of a high voltage power line in Malawi, of which comes from a hydroelectric power station. So it means that we can have a very low footprint initially by tapping into hydroelectric power. We're very much focused on environmental care programs with the community on how we actually install various things that the community want between reforestation and agriculture. We're very, very careful about how we engage with the community and how we're thinking about the next stage going forward, which will be training and employment and whatever assistance programs that we can actually fund to help community development. And sustainable mining. I've talked to some mining engineers, and because we're at the top of the hill and mining back down, it's actually ideally suited for an electric trucking fleet. So they go up empty, they get full, they come back down the hill full. So it's actually a perfect scenario for an electric mining fleet, or at least an evolution towards an electric mining fleet. And therefore, why can't you have an electric light vehicle fleet on site as well? So this is positioning itself to being a genuine carbon neutral, net zero carbon project, producing products that go into carbon abatement technologies. So that becomes very important in terms of the value proposition of this company. Now, I'll just step back into the community a minute. We've had the Minister and the local MPs on site. We have engagement with the community, so information sessions so they understand what we're doing. We're very thankful for the Ambassador in Australia, in Harare, for hosting an event in Longway, where we invited the local communities to come up and actually meet the dignitaries. And we're offering local employment to geologists out of the survey. That's Sarah Masuku. She comes from the Geological Survey, and she's been on site doing our logging of our drill core. And that's a section of drill core from the second 1,000 metre deep drill hole. So it's all that bladed material, is spectacular mineralisation. We always joke it's the colours of Sarah's fingernails that change by day. They're always a different colour. So what do we have in this project? Let's put it all together. We have tenure, we have a mining licence, and we also have the environmental certificate to allow us to go into construction and production. We have so we are on track for genuinely doing a development program next year and going into operations. We have a pathway to that. We have a resource that is the globally leading resource in the world. This thing will have such impact on the industry. So I talk about it being highly strategic because it's not just a project that's capable of disrupting the control of the Chinese market on the rare earth supply chain. It's an enabler. Because if you are a magnet manufacturer, your whole business model is based around the export quota that comes out by China year by year. That's your business plan. There's no 5-year plan, there's no 10-year plan. If you have a project like this, all of a sudden a magnet manufacturer outside China has the capability of saying, I now have a 10 or a 20 or a 50-year mine plan in place. And therefore it'll enable magnet manufacturing. It will infill, therefore, the cracking, separation, refining and downstream processing facilities and enabling major investment downstream. Because this project, that resource is probably 100 years of actually mining resource. And if we extended that on 2 or 3 expansions by extra drilling, it's likely to have a mine life of 200 to 300 years. That's the kind of dimension this project has, at production rates that could be easily the same as what's coming out of MP Materials at Mountain Pass, which is about 50,000 tonnes per annum. It could produce 100,000 tonnes per annum if it wanted to. That's all coming out strategically in the next decade as to what the market wants from this project. Let's start small, let's start cheap, let's get our presence in the market, and then we'll work out what the strategy is later. That central column there between the resource and the strategy is probably the most important thing in terms of productivity for the rare earth industry outside China. And then metallurgically, we talked about recovery and concentrate grades and NdPr ratios. Most important thing there is its water-based separation. We're using electricity. So we've got a zero carbon footprint on a metallurgical technique that is simple with a product that is non-radioactive, a non-radioactive monazite deposit. It's probably the only rare earth project in the world that can make that claim. And then there's the whole ESG principle. The government has been wonderful in their support. The community has been very engaging, but you have to engage the community to get that support back. You have to be honest with them. And I said, when I first went in there, I said, look, we'll do whatever we can to be the best a visitor, going to a neighbour, becoming a partner, being a part of the community. I'll get things wrong along the way, but I'll make sure I fix it up. All I want is honesty about what you're doing and how you're going to go about it. Be informed and be honest about what you do. Now, the second project the company has is bauxite assets in Guinea. I'd just like to touch on that for a moment because not only do we have an absolutely stunning rare earth project in Malawi, we have 1 billion tonnes of bauxite resources within Guinea between 3 projects, which is basically, my nephew calls it a scoop and skip operation. You stick it into a bucket and you put it into a skip and you ship it out. It's that kind of simple processing technology. The important thing is there we've signed an MOU just recently with CBG, which is the largest organisation in Guinea for the export and coordination of bauxite logistics. We've also signed a supply agreement with C&D Logistics for 23 metric tonnes over the next 5 years. So those assets are on their way to being commercialised. They were the original assets within the organisation. Of special note is that Garwal project. Most bauxite assets have around about 45% alumina oxide with something like 10% or 8 to 12% silica. These are particularly low in silica. The unique thing about Garwal is it goes to about almost a 60% alumina grade at a 2.8% silica. So it's obviously the one that's of most interest to organisations. The poor cousin in that, which is interesting, is Woola, is a project that we thought would always not be produced or not get to until the very end. But we've got an organisation at the moment, because it's only like 20 kilometres from port, saying that project is one of the ones we're actually particularly interested in. So there's commercialisation strategies around all 3 of those projects that will precipitate out in the near term. So let's pull it back together as why Lindian? We've got 2 world-class assets, 1 billion tonnes of bauxite in Guinea, which has probably a productivity of life of many decades, but one of the most beautiful, highly strategic projects, rare earth projects in the world at KANGANKUNDE, which I nicknamed the King. I nicknamed it that because Australians have trouble pronouncing KANGANKUNDE. And as it turns out, it is the King. It is going to be the most influential rare earth project in the world over centuries of productivity, with a net zero carbon footprint, with a non-radioactive product that will foster major investment globally within downstream processing facilities and generally give the globe the ability to have independence of supply from Chinese control on rare earths. So is it a good investment? And someone asked me yesterday, should I invest in Lindian? I said, well, I'm the CEO. Saying, what am I going to say? Of course. But I tell you, what I say to my family is that just accumulate this stock, because generations down, my family will say back, I'm getting this dividend out of a company that some old bloke a couple of centuries ago developed over in a place called Malawi. It's that kind of project where it will just have such fundamental influence on company growth. It's going to have an enormous amount of impact on Malawi. And what will foster from this, plus the other mining projects that will come in Malawi, is going to be sensational to see how Malawi develops and grows within this opportunity. If you are an ESG fund or an ethical investor, we have a net zero carbon, chemical-free, non-radioactive product that is the greatest investment in terms of its footprint, in terms of a mining company. So then you've got the whole growth strategy of we're going to start small, we're going to start cheap. We will de-risk this project at very early stages for 2 or 3 years, and then we'll go into expansion. We'll build the strategy with the rest of the global community in rare earths as to what do you want us to be next? Do you want us to be 30,000 tonnes per annum rare earths, 60, 90, 120? What is the strategy here? Because it's going to have to come together with a major amount of investment somewhere in the globe in downstream processing. So this is a really great time to be within the company, because it's it's a fundamentally fantastic organisation. So I'm very proud to be the CEO. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for your time today. My name's Alistair Stevens, the CEO of Lindian. I'm very proud to be here today. Thank you very much.